Hey, what's up, stock compounders? Brad here. So just yesterday on the I Am Home podcast, we heard from Todd Combs. Okay, this is a podcast, a special episode leading up to the Berkshire Hathaway annual general meeting. A year ago at this time, Ted Weschler actually did a podcast episode with these same folks, okay? And I think this podcast is associated with Nebraska Furniture Mart, okay? So it would make sense that Ted and Todd would be willing to give interviews with these people. Of course, Ted or Todd need no introduction. Todd is the multi-billion-dollar investment manager with Berkshire Hathaway, also the president and CEO of GEICO. So this was a 68-minute podcast episode. I'm going to share my highlights. And I already kind of pulled those highlights together in a Twitter thread that I posted last night. So just to make it easier, we're going to run through this Twitter thread with my highlights, and maybe I'll expand on some of them as we go through. I can probably count on one hand the number of times I've heard Todd Combs give an interview, so this was pretty unusual. So he kicks off the interview by talking about when and how he met Warren Buffett. So Todd was in a value investing course at Columbia University in the fall of 2001. And at the end of every course, they bring in Warren Buffett to talk to the students. And the big impact on Todd was when Buffett talks about how much he reads, okay? Buffett says the compounding of that knowledge accrues over time. It never goes away. There's no decay rate. And every one of you can do it. It's free, right? You can just get books from the library. There's plenty of free resources online. But most people don't do it. And one of the things that Todd pointed to for the reason for that is just people just don't have that focus. Okay, they don't have the commitment to reading every day, expanding our knowledge. So most people just don't do it. Now, Todd took this as a personal challenge. Okay, he decided that day that he would start doing this, reading 500 pages a week consistently. He says from that day forward, he committed to reading 500 pages a week. The lesson that Todd took away from Buffett is that you can either approach things actively or passively. Most people approach things passively. But if you do this actively, if you commit to reading, 500 pages a week, you create a tighter feedback loop on your mistakes, your learning process, and it becomes more iterative. You become a learning machine. And clearly, Buffett and Munger both fit into that camp. Todd says 5 years into running his own fund, he was fried. He started his fund in 2005, ran it through the global financial crisis, said they had done quite well, but it took everything out of him. He was working 100-plus hour weeks, sleeping at the office. He says, I lived in dog years during the global financial crisis. So, he really wanted to move towards having a permanent capital base as opposed to having limited partners that he kind of had to report to. And, if they needed their money back, he was forced to do that. He didn't like this kind of temporary capital pool. So, he liked the model that Berkshire Hathaway was using under Buffett and Munger. So he reached out to Munger. Okay, he talked to his secretary. He realized very quickly the secretary was trying to figure out, all right, what's this guy selling? And it took a little while for Combs to convince Munger's secretary he wasn't selling anything. He really just wanted to understand better from Munger, how this was working, having a permanent pool of capital, and how Combs might be able to shift over to that. So they had 12 conversations over the course of 3 to 4 months. And then finally, Munger suggested that Combs meet Buffett. Okay, and I didn't put it in the Twitter thread, but on that first meeting with Buffett, it was like a 7-hour meeting. And at the end, Buffett offered Combs a job. That was totally unexpected to Combs. And Todd said that was a good thing, because if he realized he was being interviewed, it would have been a lot more stressful. He just thought they were having a conversation. He thought maybe Buffett wanted to meet with him because Todd owned Equifax and Buffett had some similar positions. And he thought maybe Buffett just wanted to learn more about Equifax. So the unexpected interview, what turned out to be an interview. Todd says, if you try to change your swing, it isn't going to work. So this relates to, upon being hired by Berkshire, Buffett gave Todd Lou Simpson's portfolio. Okay, $2.5 billion portfolio, still had all of Lou's positions in it. Of course, many of these Combs wasn't familiar with. And, at first he asked Buffett, well, do you want to talk about these positions? And Buffett's like, no, this is your portfolio. You manage it, okay? You make it your own. So Todd realized I had to make a resolution to myself that I was going to do it my way, right? He couldn't do it Lou's way. He couldn't do it Buffett's way, because he wasn't Lou or Buffett. He had to do it his way. So, he sold a lot of the portfolio. He bought MasterCard and Visa. He says those were the first names he bought. And we're actually going to talk about MasterCard a little bit later in the thread. Pretty fascinating story about when Todd first valued MasterCard. If you just keep your head down and focus on the process, things will take care of themselves. So this is such an important point. Particularly in the game of investing, it's very easy to get focused on the outcome, right? We all want to be wealthy, right? We want to have financial freedom. It's very easy to focus on that and try to reverse engineer how to do that. But that's not what Todd has done. He says people can go off the rails when they focus on the outcome instead of the process. When you're focused on the outcome, you can really have some impatience, right? Because it's about the destination when you focus on the outcome. But when you focus on the process, it's a totally different animal. And this is something I hear a lot from Bill Belichick, right? The coach of the New England Patriots. And John Huber has pointed to this as well. One thing John said that really struck me, when something great happens, like there's a great play, there's a great outcome for the Patriots, but it wasn't about the process, it was kind of a lucky break, Belichick isn't pleased about those situations. But if they really follow the process, right, if they execute well and the outcome isn't what they wanted, Belichick is very content with that situation. Okay, and that's the difference. He's focused on the process versus the outcome, on what you can control, right? The process is really things that you can control. It's about doing it right. It's about doing it well. And it's not always going to give you the outcome you want, but it's much more productive to focus on the process. If you think you're batting 1,000, okay, perfect batting score, right? You're hitting everything you swing at. First of all, you're probably fooling yourself. Second of all, you're probably missing a lot of things. And this really speaks to the idea that investing, nobody has a perfect record in investing. It's not a game where you should even seek to have a perfect record. Okay? You want to be striking out a lot and pushing the envelope in the game of investing. So this is certainly different from how a lot of beginning investors think, particularly investors who have been trained by school to want to be perfect, right? We want to get straight A's. We want to do everything right. But that's really not the game of investing. It's a probabilities game. It's a game of seeking asymmetries, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But Pabrai has mentioned a lot recently. I don't remember if it was Lynch or Templeton, but somebody said even the best investors are going to be wrong a third of the time. Okay, so you're not going to bat more than 600. Okay, 666, and that's just part of the game. And if you are batting higher than that, you're probably not stretching yourself enough. So that's the idea there. Combs said, I used to read 48 books each year. Now it's a struggle to get 12. Okay, being full-time CEO at GEICO and managing multi-billion dollars at Berkshire Hathaway. He says, I used to feel compelled to finish a book, right? This is kind of the sunk cost fallacy. I've already put time in this. I should keep going until the end. He says, now I put the book down and move on if it doesn't grab me in the first few chapters. This is something Pabrai has talked about as well. There's just so many books out there. There's so many great books out there. If you're not having fun with a book after the first couple chapters, cut your losses. Move on to the next one. The one thing I still read from my days at Columbia is Jim Grant's Interest Rate Observer. Todd says he's also a big fan of Matt Levine on Bloomberg. And he's asked, what should people be reading more of? He thinks, I think most people would probably be surprised how few people read annual reports, right? Very basic. Reading an annual report kind of gives you an introduction to what a company is all about. But so few people do it. Trade magazines are a phenomenal source of information. He says, when I contact folks that are quoted in trade magazines, right, these are experts in their fields, to get more information, he's able to reach them 9 out of 10 times. Now, he used to do this himself. Now he has his analysts do this. But such a great source of information, trade magazines. In investing, there's quantitative, right, numbers-based, and qualitative. This is kind of the soft metrics, management, right, the people, the culture of the business. That's qualitative. There should be 2 courses for investing. One, how to value a security, right, the numbers, relatively easy. And number 2, the qualitative analysis. This is the secret sauce. This is what makes a business great. He says when Warren and I talk about stocks, it's 95%, maybe even 99% qualitative. We're talking about moats, barriers to entry, stuff you're not getting much of in filings or annual reports, right? This is the secret sauce. This is stuff, businesses don't necessarily want to reveal to all of their competitors what makes their business great. So it really necessitates drilling in and coming at it from different angles and different sources. In terms of assessing a business, you want to essentially work inside out. Okay, this was one of the most impactful parts of the interview for me. You want to start with the details, and then those details form the foundation from which you can build upon, that you then gain a qualitative understanding of the business, building up from the details. Too many people start outside in with the narrative, right, from other investors, maybe from the CEO, the story of the business, right? So you take that story in as a starting point and try to build your thesis from there. He says if you start with any narrative, you start forming all of your opinions based on a loose narrative that you formed that was completely erroneous to begin with. Okay? You want to build up from facts, not a story. It's no different from the scientific process. You don't start with a narrative and try to prove it. Okay? That is not the proper way to go about science. You start with the facts and build it from there. The best scientists actually are constantly trying to disprove whatever they believe about something, right? Their thesis, their hypothesis. They're trying to disprove it, not to prove it. Many investors start with the story and they look for confirming evidence, right? This is confirmation bias. Todd says, I don't even look at the market cap of a name. A game I've always played with myself is to look at a company, do the work, build up what I would buy that entire business for, right? Just from the facts. 80 to 90% of the time, I'm within 20% of where the enterprise value or market cap trades at, right? The kind of fair market value, right? The market cap of the company. Occasionally, there are anomalies, right? Where what Todd is willing to pay for the whole business is, radically different from what the market is valuing that company at. For example, MasterCard went public at $3 to $3.5 billion. Todd said he valued it at like $30 billion. Okay, not knowing what the market traded it at. So that's that's a 10x discrepancy between what Todd thought it was worth and what the market thought it was worth. So those are the opportunities we really want to find as investors. Doing it this way avoids the anchoring effect. Okay? Once you're anchored, you're anchored. You can't really undo it. You start questioning yourself, well, they think this, right? Why don't I think that? Here's their assumptions about the business. Maybe I should have those assumptions too, right? And all of the little decisions that go into the valuation get us closer and closer, right? We tweak those assumptions to get us closer to what the market values the company at. That's the anchoring effect. And now you're just wrapped around an axle, right? That's Todd's way of framing it. The first book I gave to Warren and Charlie was Ubiquitin by Mark Buchanan. It's all about power laws and fractal laws. We all tend to think linearly about life and risk, when in fact it's much more about a power law. So that's definitely on my reading list, Ubiquitin by Mark Buchanan. Talking more about risk. He's talking about the brilliance of Ajit Jain is avoiding selling cheap out of the money puts, okay, in the insurance business. That's where the rubber meets the road. This is something I added at the end here. You can make a lot of money betting that something extreme won't happen, right? That's what most professional investors do, right? They bet that even businesses, right, particularly businesses in banking, in finance, but businesses in general, right? We tend to avoid these black swan risks, right? These really uncommon scenarios that can really blow up the business, particularly if the business is leveraged. You can make a lot of money betting that something extreme won't happen until it puts you out of business. Okay? This is how most businesses are set up relative to risk. Okay? A risk that rarely happens can come and just destroy a business. And Ajit has really positioned Berkshire to not be exposed to those kinds of risks. When I look at a business, I want to know where are they taking risks that are laying beneath the surface, right? Risks laying beneath the surface, they're hidden from most people. I'm looking for asymmetric risk and asymmetric upside that is unaccounted for, okay? And then to finish things off, what's the one thing that has been statistically proven to have a correlation with success in life? It's the Marshmallow Test, right? As a kid or as an adult, if you're given a marshmallow, do you eat it right away or do you wait 15 minutes to get a second marshmallow? And of course, this points to patience, right? Joel Greenblatt called patience the secret, the big secret of successful investing. Pabrai has called it, the most important trait for a successful investor, patience. So here it is again. And you can probably train yourself to be more patient, but some kids just have it, right? And that's a huge advantage in life and investing. If you have that, quality to be able to wait for more reward later, kind of forego the reward today to get more later. Anyway, guys, here's the full podcast episode. I will link it in the description. Well worth listening to that entire 68 minutes. I think I listened to it on like 1.5 speed. So, 45 minutes or so. And yeah, it's a great primer to get excited about this weekend for the Berkshire Hathaway annual general meeting. So that's all I got today, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this. I'll also link to this thread if you want to spend a little bit more time with it. If you are on Twitter, please give me a follow. Retweet the thread. It would really help me out. All right, guys. Thanks for watching and excited for the Berkshire Hathaway meeting this weekend. See you all in the next one. Take care.